So I'll just start then with a slightly delayed welcome, and stress levels have just shot through the roof. But yeah, it's just gone 7 o'clock according to my computer, honestly. So welcome to the 2024 British Orienteering Development Conference, and so many thanks for giving up your time on a very cold January evening. I'm sure you'd prefer to go out for a run on a lovely January evening like this, wouldn't you? But anyway, this is the first of 12 sessions over the next 4 weeks, and we're really excited about it. The conference really has been designed to contain a range of club development, coach development, and also skill development webinars and workshops, which we hope are relevant to you and your club. And they're all based around the themes of the strategic plan, which are changing perceptions, creating engaging experiences, strengthening lifelong pathways, and providing foundations for success. And the aim really is to prompt some thought and some actions for us all to consider, having listened to all these wonderful presenters, and helping your club then to really thrive and develop onwards through 2024, and as we continue to work closely together and develop stronger relationships, developing our fantastic sport. So slight delay to the start, but I'm sure it's going to be fantastic. So over to Joe to run through some basic housekeeping, and then to introduce our fantastic speaker. Thank you.
I'm still on mute there for a second. Huge thank you to Howard for the introduction, and yes, welcome again everybody to the 2024 Development Conference. It's very exciting to be here after a lot of emails and a lot of preparing and a lot of working with Teams webinar. So just to introduce, so this is the Making Orienteering Work for Schools session. So my name is Joe Fermor-Worrell. I'm Club Support Officer here at British Orienteering, and if you're signed up for more than one of these sessions, you will be very sick of the sight of me by the end of these few weeks. Now, this session is hosted by Shaun Dowling, who is the head of sport with, and I've literally lost the tab right behind me, the head of sport at United Learning Academy Trust. I would happily go on flourishing a bit about the achievements, but I think I'll let Shaun fill it in for himself. Otherwise, I'll end up embarrassing him. So quickly, I'm just going to run through some guidance, a bit of housekeeping for everything that we'll be going through tonight. As we've already had, the first part was just making sure the microphones are on mute to come in. We're all sorted on that one. So first I can skip straight to some hellos. Could everybody please click on the chat icon at the top of your screen and say a quick hello, and also add the full name of your club rather than your club abbreviation, as this will help Shaun identify you as we go on. I'm about to see plenty of hellos flying in. Let's see there. So just in that chat at the top. And I'll go on a little bit whilst this. There we go. Julie Ferris-Worth on the first one. Excellent. I can see Helen. I can see plenty of people getting on board with that. So whilst everybody's popping in their hellos, I will just mention the during the presentation, we should be expecting the presentation to last between probably about 20 and 30 minutes or so. Now this session, obviously there'll be a good Q&A portion as well. So during the presentation, if you have any questions at all, please pop them in the chat, which is right where you're saying hello at the moment. Our presenter will be waiting in this case till the end of the session to get on with the questions. So feel free to either put the questions in now or just hang fire on them. That also works until the end. And then when we arrive at the Q&A session, if you could please use the raise hand function along the top of the screen, and that will either be just on the top or in the little reactions menu. And then when the hands are raised, we can get an eye on where people are coming from, which order the hands have gone up in, and we'll also be able to get around to as many questions as possible. If we do run out of time for any hands up questions, then what I'll do is on the feedback form that we'll be sending out tomorrow, there'll be a little place for you to put in any additional questions, and I'll get a list of those over to Shaun and any others that could be answered by Howard or any of us here at British Orienteering. During this time, the webcams for the session have been disabled. That's because we've got an awful lot of people here tonight, and that'll be an awful lot of faces at the same time. As the microphone's been muted for now, later on in the Q&A, you'll be able to unmute your microphone and ask the questions when called upon. And if there's any other time where the microphones come on, please don't be offended if we quickly mute them for you. After all that housekeeping, I will pass over to Shaun for the presentation. If you're ready to go, Shaun.
I think so, Joe. Yeah, just let me know whether this can be seen properly, etc., and we'll go from there. Do I need to do anything?
Yep, I can see your screen there.
Thank you for the invitation, first and foremost. Thank you for inviting me along this evening and listening to everything that Joe was saying about the logistics of getting organised. Thank you for giving up your time for this evening. I hope to make it as worthwhile and valuable for you as possible. But if I don't address any of the questions, as Joe said, please do save them up for the end and I'll do my best. And it is a perspective that I'll be giving you today. It was interesting just looking at the list of clubs as you come through there. So Jane from the South Downs, I'm your neighbour, so I'm near you, but we have schools as far as the Ribble Valley as well, which I saw. So the perspective that I'm going to be giving you today is kind of multiple, I hope. Teacher for many years, senior leader, deputy head in schools, secondary schools. So I have a wealth of education background behind me. But I was trying to become a head, so I went for a job at the Youth Sport Trust, which lasted for 3 years. So I have some experience working in the sector as well. And I was then seconded to United Learning for a year. This was 11 years ago. And the aim was to establish the head of sport for that multi-academy trust so that the chief exec could kind of get a gauge on what that role might look like, how it might function, etc. And after that year, he asked me to stay on and actually then undertake that role. And so this is my 11th year there. And in recent years, I've also been kind of on the AFP task force, the Association for Physical Education. I was part of the Ofsted review group recently. I'm still non-exec chair of the Leadership Skills Foundation. I'm into my final year there now. But if I attend a British Triathlon webinar, I am in your shoes because I am a community head coach in triathlon sport. So some of the issues which you face, I am familiar with too, as a volunteer in the community, trying to get young people involved in the sport. So hopefully I can have some empathy with you and your position, but also give a really good perspective and helpful perspective from both the education and school sport kind of landscapes. So United Learning looks a little bit like this if you were to cluster our schools together. We are a national organisation of schools. We are the largest in the country, 103 I think we are as of today. You can see there are areas where we don't have any schools at all, that kind of East Anglia area, and really from Somerset west we don't have any schools. And although it looks like a big blob in the middle, we actually don't have any schools in and around, or secondary schools anyway, in and around the kind of Birmingham, Wolverhampton area. But pretty much most areas of the country are state academies or independent schools, secondary, primary or all through schools that are part of the United Learning Group. And it's very easy to kind of talk of us as a group of multi-academy trusts. And I'm aware that sometimes if you're not in education, what a multi-academy trust actually is may not be familiar with you. It may be a term you're not used to. If we just go back 20 years, they really weren't in very much existence at all. I think they started in 97. But now, as you can see, the kind of the green colour at the bottom are those number of academies. And you can see that it varies from region to region. So in the northwest, there are much fewer. The southwest, there are many more. East Midlands, a lot more as well. And academies can be standalone academies, but most often they are in a group of schools called a multi-academy trust. But they themselves vary enormously. As you saw from the map, we're a national group with schools from Kent to Cumbria and as far across as Somerset, and most places in between. But many multi-academy trusts are actually much more locally concentrated. They'll be around a particular town or a particular geographical area. So there are probably, 8, 9, 10 more national scale multi-academy trusts. But in terms of the schools you are likely to be working with, which is most likely they'll either be a standalone or they'll be involved in a local multi-academy trust. I think most of you on the call today will be interested more in the secondary phase, but you can see there, look at the number of secondary schools that are actually academies now. When I first went on the board of what was then Sports Leaders UK, one of the issues I raised was at that time, which I think was 8 years ago now, 52% of secondary schools were academies. And the other board members had no idea of that. They were still trying to work with individual schools, whereas the perspective I was able to bring with them and hopefully contribute as a board member and a trustee was actually there's a much more efficient way of approaching schools now if they are part of a wider multi-academy trust. So that's us as United Learning and myself in terms of hopefully a little bit of credibility for you. But our relationship with British Orienteering goes back about 4 or 5 years now. We were receiving a grant from Sport England as they technically didn't go through multi-academy trusts, they were through teaching school alliances, but because we had both, we were able to access that funding. And as part of that money, I kept a big pot to spend to procure CPD and support for teachers centrally. But I also then passported some of that budget to schools to spend on their own specific and bespoke needs. So it was my relationship with Howard, which was enabling me to recommend orienteering to schools and say, look, centrally, I'll pay for this CPD, I'll pay for the mapping. If obviously it would need to be organised through Howard, but if you come through me, I can be the conduit for that, rather than kind of 20 isolated schools approaching British Orienteering. A, they may not have done, probably, but B, it was much more time efficient and effective for us to do that. And that relationship began quite small with a couple of schools getting involved, but by the end, as you can see the impact there, we had over 20 P departments get training, which was at the time about 50% of our academy, so a really high impact in terms of volume. And well over 100 teachers got CPD training from British Orienteering, males and females in terms of both the staff, but also the children that were then participating. And it has been predominantly a curriculum impact that orienteering has had, much more so than as an extracurricular activity. I did a bit of research a couple of years ago about our average curriculum time with some of our state academies, so this doesn't include any of our independent schools. And I'll be interested to know, this is a rhetorical question, but where does orienteering fit in a school's PE curriculum? Where could it fit? And if you don't know the acronym for OAA, that's Outdoor and Adventurous Activities, and it might be that that's a natural fit. And indeed it is, and many of our schools do include orienteering as part of their OAA curriculum in school. But other PE departments incorporate orienteering into fitness, health-related exercise, into that unit of work. And other PE departments actually incorporate it into athletics and use it as part of the endurance activity that they undertake, in terms of athletics teaching. So you can actually, whilst you won't see very rarely anyway, orienteering as such on a school curriculum, it might be within those activities, but also if you're trying to promote it, it's also, I think, from your perspective, helpful to be able to promote it, that it could be taught within other areas of the curriculum as well. And lots of schools teach a lot of athletics in the summer term. How can orienteering play a role within that, even if you may not see actually orienteering on the timetable as such? So that was kind of my first question for you. So, where do you think it might fit? And my second question, again rhetorical, because we want to try and keep the microphones off for the time being, is what is your understanding at the moment about what schools' priorities and needs are? Standards is a given. So, academic outcomes for young people is clearly a massive responsibility for head teachers in all schools across the country. Always has been, always will be. But at this moment in time, what are the additional priorities and needs nationally that heads are focusing on? These are the big three, and you'll see some of this in the press, I'm sure, from time to time, but behaviour, attendance and mental well-being. The behaviour of young people post-COVID has clearly deteriorated, Attendance nationally is a massive issue. We are far below any other previous levels of student absenteeism, and there is a massive core of young people that are persistent absentees. And obviously, you'll all be familiar with the rise in mental health issues with young people, the prevalence of them, but also much more easy to self-report that now, which is really helpful for those young people. But where local authorities have had all their budgets cut with austerity, etc., there aren't quite the same level of resources to support the number of young people that need that help. We do know there's a positive association between taking part in PE, sport, physical activity, and levels of mental well-being. It's well researched. So in addition to that, what are the other key drivers for schools at the moment? Personal development is where physical education fits within an Ofsted inspection. So it's really important that PE is playing a role beyond just skillfulness and tactical awareness and understanding of various different sports activities. But how is PE contributing, and school sport, to the personal development and the character of young people, and how are schools evidencing that? But Ofsted are really clear also that in one of their pillars for physical education in their recent Ofsted review is motor competency. So the sports and the activities that schools choose to put on their curriculum have got to be helping the physical competency, the motor competency of young people, as well as knowledge, knowledge and understanding, personal development, and their character and their mental well-being, of course. So be thinking all the time, how is orienteering relevant to those? What role has orienteering got to play? And of course, you're up against big hitter competition in here. How can you stand alone? How can you to foot in the door, which we'll come on to in a moment. One of the Sport England surveys which they do is the Children and Young People's Active Life Survey, and this came out in the week before Christmas. And one of the big discrepancy areas around young people and physical activity is their demographic differences. So in essence, the poorer you are, the less likely you are to be physically active. So to what extent is, again, a rhetorical question to you, is orienteering an accessible, inclusive activity for young people? And if at the moment that is not top of your list of drivers when you're meeting a school, how can it be? Can you promote more of that side of things as well? And the other big area is gender. And I think orienteering's got a massive role to play here, because you are not gender qualified. There is no traditional distinction between males and females in orienteering. There's no kind of history of it being a female sport. I think you've got a real opportunity to come through as, and to come across as, and to genuinely be an activity that is fully accessible to boys and girls of all ages, and of all incomes, as I mentioned before. So to what extent are you already, or could you do better in the future at marketing yourselves in terms of that inclusive agenda? I guess I mentioned earlier about it being one relationship that I had with Howard. Who is that relationship going to be if you are going to get into schools? So think about the multitude of pressures on the head teacher. Vast number of people that want a piece of a head teacher's time on a daily basis. It really is remorseless for them, relentless for them, and it is just an ongoing battle of head teachers trying to prioritise their time, because they want to do everything. They want to say yes to everybody. They haven't got the budget to do it. They haven't got the staffing to do it. They haven't got the capacity to do it. So there has to be a filtering through at some point of what gets head teachers' attention and what doesn't. And within that, PE's fighting that ground too. We want to be seen as a valued subject in the school. We want to be front and centre in terms of schools' value and vision and policy and the role it plays in the development of well-rounded young people. but it's a fight to get through the door still, even for the whole subject. And if you think about all the other things, even within that whole subject, you're here tonight as British Marine, you're trying to get in the door to PE, which is trying to get in the door to the head teacher. But there are massive organisations all competing for time in the curriculum, for time with teachers to run extracurricular activities and to do school sport. It's a very, very competitive market there. And all of these activities around the outside, all these sports, and obviously many, many more, believe passionately that they're the right sport for young people. Of course you do. We're all massively passionate about our own individual sports. And again, a PE teacher might have 2 or 3 members of staff. They might have 4 members of staff, but 2 of them might be heads of year and 1 might be a senior teacher. They can't do everything. They have to make choices. What's going to make them choose orienteering as an activity, either to include in the curriculum or to run as an extracurricular activity? And there's no one answer to that question, but hopefully I'm going to help you with a few potential tips, or at least with some of the thinking that might help you kind of get through the door, or at least get the door maybe a bit more ajar than it was previously. So there's British Orienteering, trying to get into the school door. I think it's a wrong question. So if I go back, how can British Orienteering get into schools? That's not the right question. For me, the better question is, how can you help the school to achieve its aims? If your focus, and when I say if your focus, I'm talking about if any of us involved in community sports trying to get into a school, if it's about trying to get promotional activity for our school, for our sport, if we're going with our sport hat on, I think that's really hard to then open the door. But if we're going in to try and help the school to address the needs it set out for itself, then you're going in with can we be on your team? We know that you want to achieve this is how we think we can help you. How can we help the school achieve its aims? And that might be, don't forget, an individual school, but it might be a multi-academy trust. It might be that locally there are insufficient school sport opportunities for girls. Are you the solution to that? It might be that locally students are being priced out of community clubs at the weekend. How can you be the answer to that? How can you be the solution to that? They haven't got enough staff in their school to run any more activity clubs. Don't worry, we've got a solution. We can come in, we can run the club. We'll do this, we'll do that. We've got this level of qualification. We've done this bit of child protection paperwork. We've got these safeguarding. Think about what does the school want, and then how you can be there to be the solution for some of that. So I think for you, inclusivity could be potentially a massive tick in the box for you. You're absolutely about physical activity. You're not one of the more sedentary sports that there are trying to get into schools. You are about physical activity. You're about getting outside, fresh air, exploring. You could potentially, I don't know, bring additional capacity if you've got that facility to and the personnel in your club. How in any way can you get some human resource to support the schools? Could the school be a satellite club for your main club? What about the progressions that you can offer them? What about the competitions you can offer them? What can you do to lift your sport above the others, but that is also at the same time helping the school to get more young people more active, more regularly in more progressively challenging competitions and events? And I guess a bit of a challenge to you as well is once the schools, we've had, as I say, over 20 schools get their school mapped. What happens next? If they're doing the same route all the time, or if their space is kind of limited, so it's not a great bit of variety. How can you help them to create that variety? And you might have the solution to that already, and I just might be ignorant of it. But it's just a question. I was at school the other day in Nuneaton and looking at their playing areas and playing fields, and speaking to them about orienteering as a potential solution to one of the issues they were talking about in terms of getting young people active beyond the school day. And he said, but we just don't have the space. It just wouldn't be worth it. And, if we put a course on, well, within a week, they'd have all done every possible variation of it. So how else can you help schools to increase the variety and challenge within British orienteering, within orienteering sport? So what's your best route into schools? Is it through the multi-academy trust? Is it through the head teacher? Is it through the head of PE? That's a really difficult question to answer, because I think it will vary from context as to whether a school is standalone, whether it's part of multi-academy trust, and the extent to which PE is valued and has got a high priority within the school. I think that's a sounding out job locally for you, but then get that relationship, build that relationship. And the old phrase of WIFM, what's in it for me? What's in it for the school to build a relationship with you? What do they gain out of it? And it's easy for us who are in community sport to say to school, we'll get more young people active. Question, which young people? How much more active? How are you going to track it? How are we going to staff that? How can you help us make this happen? Because as a head teacher, I want all those things. Brilliant. How actually physically can you help? I don't want a pie in the sky kind of meeting about wouldn't it be nice to see more kids come to our club at a weekend. That's not going to happen by itself. How can we get the stepping stones in place to enable that to happen? It's going to have to start with some curriculum activity or extracurricular activity and competitions. Oh, and by the way, this person here is the same person that's at this club on these days. And when you go there, we'll buddy you up and we'll support that transition into the club, and we'll let your PE teacher know how you're getting on every month. This is stuff that's been around for decades, isn't it, about how we help young people transition into community clubs. But it's still a real priority for almost every NGB as well, barring kind of some real big hitters like football. Pretty much most other national governing bodies that I deal with are still trying to help young people transition into community clubs. Okay, I think I can stop sharing. Howard, is that helpful? Joe, is that useful?
Yeah, that was absolutely fantastic, Shaun. It was a really good, insightful little session there, and I'm more than happy to start taking questions. I'm happy. Would you like me to sort of pick them out of the chat and facilitate that way, or do you want to just go for the chat yourself?
If you've been tracking them, that's great, because I haven't been able to see anything other than my own.
That's no
Jason,
problem at all.
Okay. Delighted, Jason. You're working with Cornerstone.
Yeah, but I believe
indeed.
Helen's comment was when you were asking about the factors, the sort of main factors at the school.
Oh, yeah. Yes, spot on, Helen.
She was right onto it, and then some more support from Jason along the way. So at this point, I'd like to obviously invite questions to the floor. There's you can either put them in the chat, or if you'd like to use the raise hand feature, then we can sort of throw over to any of you guys if you'd like to unmute your microphone and ask the question. But to start off, Jason, so his question: where would the link between DOE and orienteering be?
I guess I don't know enough about the Duke of Edinburgh, but I do know that button. I'm not sure, because the DV is always extracurricular activity rather than curriculum activity. I think the orienteering could definitely be there as one of the challenges which people have to do as part of the DV process. But in terms of the curriculum button, I think orienteering would predominantly come under OAA, health, leisure and fitness, potentially, but I think helping schools to understand that it could also fit into athletics, I think could be a really good step for orienteerers. I don't know if that's answered your question, Jason.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Perfect. And do we have? I can't see any hands up at the moment in the chat, but Dennis has come in at the perfect moment for another question. So, do any of your schools take children off site to do courses in local parks?
do you mean orienteering courses? I presume,
Yes,
is that?
I believe so. Yeah.
Not to my knowledge at all. We have some schools, I think of a couple in London in particular, where they have no field space themselves. So their school playing field is literally the local park, which includes Clapham Common, another park over in kind of Chelsea Hurlingham area. But I don't know of any schools, particularly in the curriculum time, because time to travel, time to get there, time to get back. And then if an open park means children go out of sight of the teacher, we then got some safeguarding bits and pieces to concern ourselves with there. So I think that would be tricky, not impossible, depending on the course, I'm guessing.
Perfect. I've got a raised hand, but we've got these two questions in the chat first, and then I'll come to you, Mr. M. Davis, with the hand up. So the next question, David Averill. My school starts orienteering as part of the PE curriculum in spring, and I've just bought a starter SI kit. What help can BOF give me? That might be a better question for Howard. Do you want to take that one now, or do you want to carry on with Sean's questions?
Yeah, I can take that one very quickly, David. I think the best thing to do is we can deal with this one offline, because it is probably quite a detailed discussion about what we can actually do for you. So if you want to email me or just email Joe, that'll be fine. We'll get onto that straight away. Thank you.
At the end of the session, I'll pop in both mine and Howard's email addresses just in the chat, and on the email you should get tomorrow as a follow-up. I'll make sure to pop those on there as well. Andrew asks, was also thinking of seeking relationships with academies, but been surprised at how little coordination seems to take place within even a local academy, with PE decision makers having no contact with their counterparts elsewhere. Is this typical?
I don't know if it's typical, but it's not uncommon, certainly, Andrew. To kind of talk a little bit obliquely here, in that I do know of a small academy trust where the actual individual PE departments don't have any contact coordination at all. But I know lots of smaller academy trusts where they do joint CPD, joint planning for the year, etc. So I guess on the one hand, I'm going to say I'm not sure, and it's unfortunate if you are local to a situation like that. On the other side, again, it's okay. So what can we do about it? Let's put myself in your shoes now. Could orienteering be could you offer to that group of schools some cluster CPD, cluster events, cluster tournaments that almost forces them to do it, makes it cheaper for them, but you're ticking all of their boxes, and all of a sudden could you be the one that, and again, Andrew, I'm not talking personally about you, but in anyone else also on this call or from any activity, can you be the one that becomes the glue for that group of schools? If the coordination of something doesn't already exist, go coordinate it, make it exist, and your sport might be the real beneficiary of that. I hope that's an adequate answer.
Yep, that's brilliant. I'm now coming to Mr. M. Davis with the raised hand. If you'd like to unmute and ask your question, you're very welcome to.
Yeah, thanks, Joe. It's Mark Davis. I'm the School Development Officer for Cleveland Orienteering Club, and I was just going to add some to the off-site training for schools and children, if you like. So recently, well, up to 2 months ago, we have a lot of permanent orienteering courses in local parks. And Cleveland Club, we used a country park where we have a permanent course. But we just literally invited Acton Academy, which looks after numerous number of schools, 250 students all in, came in for literally an introduction open day to orienteering. So 4 of us in the club, we spent the whole day and just taking them through map walks and a few interesting games and stuff like that. So to answer the question, it is doable if you have a course off-site that's got a permanent orienteering course, and of course you own the map. We just asked permission from the local country club or country park, and then just ran it from there. In terms of safeguard and all the rest of it, under no illusion, they owned it. They provided the safeguarding as long as we could prove that we had the correct insurance ourselves should we need it, and everyone was sufficiently first aid trained and well, albeit. But it was a long day, but it was the idea being that we generate some interest from local families, and some of the children indeed went home and spoke to their parents, and now they're part of our junior training team. So yeah, there is an option to do it.
Yeah, and particularly as a one-off like that can work really, really well. And you've addressed all the things which I said earlier about providing the capacity, the staffing, the human people there. You've got the resourcing already done, etc. So you've really laid it on a plate for them, and you've organised the event. That's brilliant. And you're exactly right. The question is, what's next? Because as a standalone event, that, and like I say, long day for. You can't be doing that every week. So how can we get the school spinning out every week? But what you've done brilliantly there is get the students afterwards to come and join you as a community club. So really congratulations on doing that. I guess my response earlier to the question about offsite was more about as a regular curricular activity rather than like what you've just described there, which is fantastic. And somewhere else, I think someone asked a question about school sport partnerships, and I think that's where they can be playing that role as well, because they do have that coordination role. They do have those relationships and those contacts with groups of schools. How can orienteering fit into the school games offer locally? To what extent are you promoting it with the school games organizer as an inclusive, activity for all young people, etc., etc. So yeah, absolutely use the school sport partnerships as and when you can. They're a great resource for you, and the activity alliances as well. Some of the organisations, name suspension for the moment, but build into those local infrastructures as best you can, rather than create anything from scratch. Even better.
Well, it also served to advertise as well, because Acklam Academy got it out there. And I've probably bitten off more than I can chew now, because quite a few school partnerships have picked up on this and have started dropping me emails. But consider it's a part-time job. It's going to turn into a full-time job soon.
Yeah, Jason, I think you just said exactly the same point, so that's really good. Lakeland, great stuff. Chris doing 4 different orienteering events, brilliant. And that's exactly the right approach. You've got to bring something to the party. So if you bring in resource, you bring in expertise and experience, and you bring in organisation to help the schools so they don't have to do it themselves, you've got a much better chance of getting through the school gate. Didn't sound like you needed me today, Joe, to be frank. It doesn't sound like everyone's already on the case. It's been fantastic.
It's always brilliant to be able to get everybody in one place to, share some of these things. That's why I'm always so interested in watching the chat on the side throughout, any of the meetings, because there's always a lot of sharing. I think Jason before was asking about, key stage 3 session plans. That's the sort of thing, Jason. Obviously, if you want to share some sort of contact for yourself, that's something that other people, in the chat can help you out with, and that's something, that we're all in the same boat together. So it's definitely something that if people do have plans, that they could possibly help you out with along that one. Do we have any more questions? Either with Howard, I think you're about to step in, are we?
Yeah, I've got a question, Shaun. Just thinking about planning and thinking about when's the best time within the school year for a club to contact a school to make sure that if it's curriculum work they're looking at, that it can be sort of factored in at the right time for both parties. Is there a best time of year to sort of contact a school?
I would say somewhere around the early part of the summer term, schools will be planning their curriculum for the following year. They won't know their timetables right until the end of the academic year, July, but they will certainly be doing their curriculum planning. So yeah, yes, it depends a little bit as well on whether you see yourself as a year-round activity, or if you have your own kind of view as to whether if there's a season as such. And because clearly you want the activity to be going on in the school either during that season or before that season, to help them potentially transition into the club and into the orienteering school competitions, etc. So I'm a little bit mindful on the seasonality of the activity, but somewhere around the start of the summer term is generally a good time when schools start to begin to think about their curriculum for the following academic year.
Many thanks, Shaun. Great information. I hope that really helps everyone.
Excellent. And we've got a hand up from Andrew, if you want to unmute your mic.
Yes, just had a thought, Shaun, because we recognise exactly the problem that you have identified, that the risk with doing work for schools is that the school takes the map with all the controls on it and does the exercise a few times, and then what do they do next?
Yeah.
And so it doesn't become sustainable. And we've been varying what we've been doing recently, and we started to introduce courses which are like star exercises, where there's only one control on any one map, and they ask to get a particular letter on a control. But it does mean that although there's some initial setup, once the setup has taken place, there is an absolute multitude of different ways in which those maps are able to be used to make words. One school for pupils that can't stay in the classroom, for instance, and have one-to-one tuition, the words they're using are things like respect, and their values that they're trying to introduce into the pupils, which I think plays to your point about understanding what the aims of the school are and trying to see if we can do something that can contribute to those aims.
That sounds fantastic. And I guess, again, my follow-up to that would be, if you've done that and you've made that work in that school or a group of schools or whatever, spread that word, share that with, help other orienteering clubs or help the organisation to get that resource into other schools somehow, or to how can that learning be captured and then replicated so that more kids benefit? Because that's a great solution to the problem that I posed to you earlier. Because once you've done the course a couple of times, not being funny, you've done the course, you know where to go. It's, we've got to keep making it interesting and exciting for young people in order to keep them engaged. So that sounds a great example, Andrew.
Excellent. Thank you for that, Andrew. And I think I've got the ability to pop your hand down, because otherwise it'll keep on glowing in the corner. Matilda in the chat's just saying orienteering the interdisciplinary benefits discovered on Inset Day as a possibility for promoting values to all staff. So there's a discussion.
Guessing, Matilda, you mean something like benefits to geography in terms of cross-curricular interdisciplinary benefits. I'm cautious, frankly, and other people may not be, so I'm just giving you a very personal opinion here. Of course, my experience is that sometimes that can feel a little bit done to by the other subject and feel like kind of shoehorning it in a little bit. That's not to decry in any way the connections between other disciplines, and it's always great when you can make the connections, but I don't think that's as much of a selling point to the key decision makers, because I think the content links are minimal in comparison, as opposed to focusing on inclusion and focusing on getting more young people more active, etc. So I think I guess what my answer to you would be, I think there are bigger wins you can make than that one. But that is a very personal opinion, and I was wearing my United Learning badge, I'd probably cover it up because that's not necessarily a view of the organisation, but that would be my personal reflection. Yeah, exactly, Matilda. Yeah, I think going on those fronts. Okay, so that's what you meant rather than subjects. Okay, my apologies. But yes, on the start, the problem with staff inset days is everyone wants a piece of that pie. Head teachers have got agendas and schools priorities in terms of training. There are national priorities around training. Then there are departments' needs for their development plan of the year, and then there's individual teachers' needs for their own CPD. Trying to get those all addressed on one inset day is a perennial problem in education, and I've experienced types of awful. I think it's really difficult to do that on an inset day. I think promoting the value of them when you're in that conversation, when you get through the door, absolutely right. Yeah, focus on all those things. Brilliant. Not on a staff inset day. I think there are better ways. I think that's more of a conversational sell rather than an inset day kind of presentation stuff.
Brilliant. Thank you, Matul, for the question and Shaun for the answer. Another one.
So what else happens in outdoor and adventurous team building kind of skills, rock climbing, potentially off-site activities, anything that's to do with adventuring. So some water sport activities, for example. So those are the other kind of things that are in that space. And traditionally, Orienteering has got that because it's it's outside, but it also is that bit of exploration and discovery and within the outdoor environment. So I think it's got a really neat place there. It's not that crowded a place, I think, but I think there's probably more space in athletics because every school does work around endurance and cardiovascular fitness and methods of training and all that sort of stuff. So I think there are multiple places you could get into the curriculum.
Brilliant. I'll put out another call for any sort of final questions, unless Howard's going to jump in again when I don't expect it. If anybody does have any final questions, then please feel free to pop them in the chat. If you do wake up in the middle of the night thinking of a striking question, then there will be a space on the feedback form to pop in any additional questions, and I'll get them popped over to Shaun. Or if there's any for us here at British Orienteering, then I'll be able to get those shared internally as well. Judith, before we work on getting in the door, do we need to work on the school club links?
No, I think that probably comes after. I think the school club, we do a lot centrally across 100 schools. You can imagine we get a lot of contact from national governing bodies, and the school club links is always the hardest bit to get right, no matter what relationship we've got with those governing bodies. But you've got to get. My personal, from my experience and my opinion, is get the relationship with the school first. Give to the school. So there's that famous phrase in there: "Friend raise before you fundraise." So give to the school, be of use to the school, be serving the school first, and then help them get the kids to your club so that your club benefit, the children benefit. More importantly, the school benefits from those children being more active, more mentally and physically fit, etc. So it is a win-win. But get in there first, build the relationship first, offer them something first, and talk about maybe club links on the back of that existing good work. Okay.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Shaun, again. So I'll still, if there are any questions sort of ticking in, I'll obviously, now add those to the list that will go out on the email. But a huge thank you, Shaun, for your time this evening. It was an excellent presentation, and the Q&A has been absolutely exciting, from questions flying in everywhere, even from our own side over here as well. And a huge thank you for the session, and thank you all for attending as well this first session. Just as a small bit of promotion, we do have our second upcoming session this week. That is on Thursday, and that is about developing stakeholder relationships within clubs. And that'll be another interesting session, as well as all the other ones that we have, all available on the British Orienteering Development Conference page, which I'll also pop in the email. All the extra sort of details and odds and ends that we've spoken about, I'll try and get into that email. But if you do have any questions, feel free to get in contact with myself or Howard, and we'll get any questions or queries passed on. But as the end of the first session, I'll say thank you all very much, and it's nice to see some thank yous flooding into the chat. The last one being from Shaun, so he's caught me off guard there. But that's Howard. Anything from you?
I just say thank you so much to everyone for tonight, and especially Shaun. Excellent presentation, and
Howard, you've managed to sneak onto mute halfway through there, and I'm not sure how.
I don't know how I did that. But I was going to say that you never know how these things are going to work out when you design them, and I think it's a really, really good outcome, really insightful. Trying to get into the head of how of the thinking that goes on in a school that isn't always apparent from the outside. So really, really good advice from Shaun. And the other thing we're going to do, we videoed this, and tomorrow Joe's going to pop it onto the website and pop it onto YouTube as well, onto our YouTube channel, and then you can look back at it if there's anything that you've missed. So the learning will continue. But yes, thanks so much, Shaun. Brilliant. And we developed a great relationship with United Learning, and long may it continue.